Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Lynette Guastaferro, CEO of Teaching Matters. Lynette, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
We have a really important conversation. As you know, school started back in New York City last week, and this comes as the Big Apple's dealing with an influx of migrants. New York City Mayor Eric Adams announced last month the city has provided care for over 100,000 asylum seekers since spring of 2022. And now over 19,000 school-aged migrants reportedly enrolled to attend school this year. As an education professional, when you hear that number, what do you think?
So I think that 19,000 is a significant number of students that are coming and that the system has to carefully plan for to ensure that they have the kinds of supports around English language learning, other kinds of, mental health supports. But I also kind of want to remind listeners that we have 140,000 English language learners in the system now out of close to 1 million students. And so we do have an infrastructure, at least in our education system, designed to provide free education programs for dual language learners. We have a whole high school system called the Internationals that are designed specifically for newcomers. And so we do, New York has always been educating, we are the education system designed for folks that come to us from many places. So I don't want to understate the planning and logistical support that's necessary. But 19,000 out of 140,000 is about 12%. And that can stress any system, but it is not an impossible number. I think the issue is longer term, but I think we can plan for that this year effectively.
So right now you're saying that this isn't reaching necessarily a crisis level. So are the classrooms prepared? Because as you're saying, they had these infrastructures in place.
So I think the challenge is ensuring that, when you come new to a country, how do you know where to go? So I know there have been services provided to families to counsel them about school and about services. But, it's coming into a new system for anybody, never mind coming from another country. New York City schools, every parent can respect the challenge of navigating New York City public schools. And so I think my bigger concern is how do students land in those schools that really have the supports for them? And the good news is most schools in New York have support for English language learners. I think 87% of our high schools support English language learners. So, again, the first thing is, are we getting them into schools that are set up to support them? And then are we getting those schools the additional resources that they may need in order to support those students? One thing I want to remind listeners is that New York has seen a decline in enrollment, and that's with the charter schools, that's with the public schools, that's with the Catholic schools. Like, we have had a decline in students in the city, and so the good news is there are spaces and schools that require students just for funding. So there is the ability here I think that you're going to find some schools that are really eager to take in new students because they are looking to fill their enrollments. But I don't want to say that there's not I think the mayor's talking long term here. When he talks about the crisis, he's using numbers that are, over the next few years, this is what this will look like, and we will get to a crisis. So he's raising the alarm bells for the future. He's not talking about like this immediate second when it comes at least to education.
In your perspective then, because it sounds like teachers have some time to prepare, how can they best prepare to really serve students, both New York students as well as these migrant students?
Well, so that's one thing I want to say that teachers who are prepared are folks who have degrees in supporting English language learners. And, we have a shortage of teachers that have that, but we do have many. So New York City students currently already include 140,000 English language learners. So those are already students that are in the classroom. So these students are joining. This is an additional, what is it? You said it was 19. It's additional 19% of students on top. No, not. It's an additional. it's an additional percentage of students being added to a significant population of kids. So when we work side by side, when Teaching Matters is, is a nonprofit professional development organization, and what we do is work with teachers, coach teachers to address all the needs in their classroom, to work around how to support kids that have very differing needs. This is not new. This is not a new need or a new set of work. For us, this will be business as usual. We'll be working with teachers, help them assess their students, identifying their needs, grouping the kids as they need, and that what students who don't speak. There's two things here. There's students who are coming to a new country. That's number one. That's a big adjustment in so many ways. It's a big emotional shift. Everything in their lives have changed, and we know that some of these kids, for the reasons they're coming, have gone through a lot of trauma. So that's the first sort of area that schools have to be very sensitive to. I've seen schools do some really amazing things where they set up groups for newcomers so that all the students that are new have a group that they're going to at lunchtime. They're just connected with each other, and so that they find a first stop where they can experience some belonging with each other. These things are important. Secondary is the degree to which the instruction, the reading instruction, the math instruction, how can teachers adjust for students that are not necessarily speaking the language, and in that first year are really going to have extra difficulty. I say to folks, imagine going to Japan and having to, in 1 year, master Japanese and then take a test in Japanese, because that's the expectation that we have for our students who are coming here. So it's a pretty high bar. But from an education perspective, these kids are walking into schools that have experience with this. They're not new to this game.
I do now want to take a step back and just think about the past few years. Obviously, education really took a blow when the pandemic hit. Now kids are back in schools, and I want to talk about immigration policies as a whole. Do you think that the way it's set up right now, and with New York City the way it is right now, immigration policies are really setting up kids to fail in schools?
I think that so I do think, and I think it's pretty uniformly understood amongst both sides, that we have a broken immigration system. And I would encourage listeners to read former Mayor Bloomberg's recent editorial this weekend, which I thought encapsulated perfectly sort of the self-defeating system that we have. And I want to read a quick quote. He said, "We have a system that essentially allows an unlimited number of people to cross the borders, forbids them from working, offers them free housing, and grants them 7 years of residency before ruling on whether they can legally stay. It would be hard to devise a system that would be more backward and self-defeating." And what I want to say from that is, I want you to imagine the child and the family that is experiencing government saying, you can't work for a year, and then for 7 years, we're not even going to tell you whether you can stay. It is a system of destabilization to a family unable to move forward or move backward that has really a negative impact. So I think there's a place for both sides to work together here. Those that are, those who see this as we are a country of immigrants. My own parents came here. The chair of the board of this organization came here when he was 14 from South America. So we are very, very sympathetic to this, such that we want a good system that actually supports families if they are coming in, when they're coming for these reasons, that they're not set up to fail. And I think there's opportunities for both sides to start to fix this so that it works for families and for the city at the same time.
Let's dive a little deeper there. How do you think both sides could come together? Where are the areas that they can agree on? Hey, this isn't working. We both can see that. Here's how we can fix that.
So one, there is no reason why it should take 7 years to make an assessment. We've got to staff that properly so that we can make faster decisions about folks and make, yay or nay, or here or not. That has to be done. Leaving a family in that kind of, that middle ground like that, leaving a family not knowing whether they're here to go or stay. I can't express to you the degree of trauma that visits on a family where they don't know whether they belong yet or they can't stay. That is a really horrible experience for someone to go through. The second is that we have to allow families to work. Why would we set up families so that they cannot work if we have said, okay, we agree, we have said you can come to the country because we're checking out whether or not we're still working out whether we're going to grant you asylum. But so while you're here, then you have the right to support yourself. What does this do? This allows parents to start to connect with a community, connect with a place of work. The key to new families coming in is to start to integrate into the communities that they're going to live in. If they are kept isolated and separate, that is another form of trauma that we visit on these families. So we have to allow them while they're here and hopefully to stay, to start to make those important connections straight away to their communities, to their places of work, and to their schools.
I can't imagine that level of trauma of leaving a place you called home, coming to a new city, perhaps not even knowing the language, not really knowing anybody, and not knowing how long you're able to stay. So what's your advice to educators to help these kids and these students that are experiencing this type of trauma?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to tell you what I can share is what I've learned from incredible educators and my team that works and supports. There's a couple different ways. So one I described is creating a home for kids within the school, a home within a home. So some of it is making sure that kids immediately are connected to potentially, depending on how many students the school has accepted, newcomer groups that are put together for lunch, like something as simple as pizza party for the newcomer group, right? Like that's a small thing, but that is a huge, huge psychological impact. Other ways that we can support kids is in the classroom. We talk to teachers about the importance of really getting to know your students. And so really knowing who they are, where they're from, what are they doing in their work. I went through some of this experience personally. And I had a teacher that allowed kids to write stories or write essays about, where they came from or something from their background. They kind of like figured out ways to tie it in. And so being able to share as a point of pride in my schoolwork, like this place I came from where I'm feeling really destabilized, and it being, I'm actually the expert on where I came from. Let me tell you about it, right? These are things that teachers can do to really have like a huge impact on kids, like value who they are, value the knowledge they bring to the table. You've got experts in your classroom on all these different countries that they've come from. So how are you going to use that in your curriculum?
I want to talk about specific comments Mayor Eric Adams made, and he said this about the migrants coming to the city. This issue will destroy New York City. How do educators make the best of this situation then? So I think if we can get ahead of this with smart policy changes, I think our mayor is saying New York can't handle a federal broken system, and we need you to fix it. And I think he's saying some really strong statements, and people have to take it in that vein. But in terms of how our teachers can respond to this, our job is to support the kids that are in front of us, and that's the end of it. And every teacher knows that, and that's what we do. So we go into a classroom, we don't ask how you got here, we say who are you and who's in front of us, and how can we support you? And that's what teachers do. And by the way, that's what teachers have been doing for years. That is a teacher's job. That's why teaching in New York is one of the most rewarding and probably one of the most challenging teaching jobs out there. But, you don't, when you're a teacher, you don't get to really get a lot of say about the immigration policy of the United States. You get to support those kids in front of you and do the best job that you absolutely can. And that's what we do in supporting them at Teaching Matters. I do want to talk about the pathway to success in the classroom. Aside from the teachers, is there anything you would tell parents and students alike, to make this situation the best it could be?
So I think for families that are coming into the country, I know there are people who are advising them on schools that they can go to. And just one thing I think that's really important is there are schools that are specifically designed where your child speaking so beautifully this other language is a huge boon to the school. So the degree that you can find dual language programs, they're all over the city. So finding schools where your child's language, I'm not saying it's not an asset everywhere, but there's particular places where it's really built into the curriculum. And so finding those schools that are really the right fit for your kid, that's hard for parents coming in that don't speak the language. So, ensuring that we make sure families know that information. And then for families that are in schools that, again, you have a dual language program and you have another student that's speaking another language. I mean, if you value your child learning this new language, like let's think about play dates. Think about like how we can connect. How can we help and step up to help families integrate? One of the things about New Yorkers is most of us are like one step away, maybe two steps away from someone who's gone through this exact same experience. So I do think that we're a city that is pretty not only empathetic, but when I see these students, I see them in 30 years, and I see them running Teaching Matters, because that's exactly what happened, right? And I see them running the schools, and I happen to know a few superintendents who have similar experiences. So I see the future leaders of New York when I see these kids. So meet them, invite them to your homes, help, set up play dates, because these kids will be running New York in probably 30 to 50 years. Mark my words.
You're a leader in education. Do you think there's anything missing from the conversation as it is right now?
I think the thing that we have to do more of is stop sort of throwing stones at each other from different perspectives on this, and really start like an honest dialogue around how to solve the problem. And that's what I think that's missing right now. I think that I think there has to be more productive dialogue around how to solve the problem. And again, I think that's starting. Don't get me wrong. I think it's really important that Mayor Bloomberg came out and wrote the editorial. I think that there can't be, the mayor was on one side of immigration and now he switched to another side. No, actually, I think that he's trying to solve a really, really complicated problem and needs all the support from everybody around that he can possibly get right now.
The topic of immigration, as we all know, has been really heated in the past couple of years. How do you think we come to the table then, both sides, and have these productive dialogues?
Well, how do we come to the table? I think we need to start listening to voices that put solutions out there and get less worried about people that are throwing stones. So if all you have to do is say something negative about how this person's terrible because they don't have the same views of you, I really think we have to just ignore it. I think we should be listening to solutions. They don't all have to be the same, but if you're not talking about solutions, close your mouth.
Lynette, thank you so much for joining me.
All right, take care. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.